The headlights cut through the blinding Christmas Eve snow, revealing something that made Robert Sullivan's blood run cold. Two small figures collapsed on the roadside, covered in bruises, barely breathing. His foot slammed on the brake, the car sliding slightly before stopping on the icy road. His 10-year-old son, Jake, lurched forward against his seatbelt. "Dad, what's wrong?" Jake's voice cracked with a sudden panic as he followed his father's gaze. "Those are kids." Robert's hands shook as he grabbed his coat from the back seat. "Stay in the car. Turn the heat all the way up." The cold hit him like a physical blow as he stepped outside, but what he saw made his stomach drop even further. Two little girls, identical twins, no more than 8 years old. Their long blonde hair was matted with ice and snow. Their clothes, thin, completely inadequate for the weather, clung to skeletal frames. Their lips had a blue tinge that made his heart race with fear. But what made his hands clench into fists were the bruises. Dark, ugly marks visible even in the dim light on their arms, their faces everywhere. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling in the snow. "Hey, sweethearts, my name is Robert. Can you hear me?" One of the girls tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering so violently no words came out. They stared at him with hollow, terrified eyes. He draped his coat around both of them. They barely reacted, their bodies shaking so hard it looked painful. He scooped both girls into his arms. They weighed almost nothing, like holding birds. As he carried them to the car, Jake was already pulling off his own jacket. "Put this on them too, Dad," Jake said, his young face pale with shock. Robert settled the girls in the back seat, wrapping them in both coats in the emergency blanket from the trunk. Their shivering was so violent, the entire seat shook. Jake climbed into the back with them, pressing close to share his body heat. "We need to get them to a hospital," Robert said, his mind racing through options. The word hospital triggered an immediate reaction. One of the girls grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "No, sir. Please, please don't take us back. She'll find us." Robert's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed that these children needed immediate medical attention, but the terror in their eyes told him something worse was waiting for them wherever back was. "I'm not taking you back anywhere," he said firmly. "But you're freezing. You need help." "Home," the other girl whimpered. Can we just go somewhere warm? We won't be trouble. We'll be good, we promise. We'll be good." Robert looked at Jake, who nodded urgently, then back at these two terrified children who would rather risk dying from hypothermia than return to wherever they'd come from. "Okay," he said softly. "We're going to my home. You'll be safe there, I promise." The tiniest nod from both girls. As Robert drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, Jake spoke gently to the twins. "What are your names?" A long pause, then barely audible. "Sophie, and this is Lily." "I'm Jake. How old are you?" 8. "How long have you been out there in the snow?" The girls looked at each other. Sophie, who seemed slightly more alert, whispered, Since this morning." Jake's voice rose. "You've been outside for 8 hours in a snowstorm." Robert's hands gripped the steering wheel even tighter. 8 hours on Christmas Eve in freezing temperatures. These children could have died. What kind of monster does this to children? Robert's mind traveled back 18 months to watching his wife Elizabeth fade from a vibrant, beautiful woman into a ghost of herself as lupus ravaged her body. The experimental treatments had drained their savings, left them drowning in debt. He'd been barely holding his own life together, working extra shifts at the woodworking shop, trying to maintain some normalcy for Jake. And now this. Two abused, starving children who'd literally appeared out of the snow. "Elizabeth, if you can hear me, what do I do?" But he already knew. There was only one thing to do. At home, Robert ran a warm bath, not hot. He knew warming them too quickly could be dangerous. The girls sat in the tub together, still trembling, while Jake brought them cups of warm water to sip slowly. As Robert prepared soup in the kitchen, his mind raced. He'd lost his wife, watched her die, despite doing everything humanly possible to save her. The medical bills had nearly bankrupted them. The mortgage was 3 months behind. This would be their last Christmas in this house. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was in that bathroom, two innocent children who'd nearly frozen to death. When the girls emerged wrapped in towels, Robert saw the full extent of their condition. They were skeletal ribs visible through pale skin. Bruises in various stages of healing covered their bodies. Old scars, new scars. Jake dressed them in his old pajamas, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs. Robert saw tears streaming down his son's face, but the boy said nothing, just helped the girls with gentle hands. At the kitchen table, Robert placed bowls of soup and crackers in front of them. The girls stared at the food like they didn't believe it was real. "It's okay," Robert encouraged. "Eat slowly. Take your time." They ate desperately fast, barely chewing. Robert had to gently slow them down, explaining that eating too quickly after prolonged starvation could make them sick. When they scraped their bowls clean, they looked at him with such hope it broke his heart. "Would you like more?" Their eyes widened in disbelief. "We can have more. You can have as much as you need," Robert said firmly. "Always." After second bowls, the violent shivering finally stopped. Jake suddenly stood up and ran to his room, returning with his arms full of toys, a stuffed bear, coloring books, crayons, a wooden puzzle. "These were my favorites when I was younger," he said shyly. "You can have them if you want." Lily reached out and touched the stuffed bear's soft fur, her eyes filled with tears. "For us, sir." "Yes, sweetheart, for you." Robert sat down, then his voice gentle but serious. "Girls, if it's okay, I need to understand what happened. Where are your parents?" The twins exchanged a glance. Then Sophie spoke. "Our mom and dad died when we were 3. We don't really remember them." Robert's chest tightened. "Who's been taking care of you?" "Our Aunt Catherine, Mama's sister. We live with her and Uncle Andrew and our cousin." "And today, what happened today?" Sophie's hand went to a bruise on her arm. "We asked for more food at breakfast. We only get 1 meal a day. Today we got a small bowl of oatmeal, but we were so hungry. When we asked for more, Aunt Catherine got really angry. She said we were greedy and ungrateful." Lily continued, her voice breaking. "She said if we wanted more food, we could go out and beg for it. She threw us outside, said we couldn't come back until we earned money or found our own food." Robert felt rage building in his chest. "This happens often." Both girls nodded, tears streaming down their faces. "Aunt Catherine says we eat too much and don't work enough, but we're always hungry, sir. We clean and cook and wash everything in the house all day. Our cousin doesn't have to do anything. And when we cry or complain, she hits us with her belt or locks us in the basement or throws us outside and tells us to go beg." "What about your uncle?" "Uncle Andrew tries to help sometimes. Gives us food when Aunt Catherine isn't looking. Says he's sorry, but he never stops her. He says he has our cousin to think about." Jake moved closer to the twins, his young face fierce with determination. "They're not going back there, right, Dad? They can stay with us." Robert looked at his son, at the boy who'd lost his mother but still had room in his heart to love, and then at these 2 broken little girls who'd nearly frozen to death. His savings were gone. He was drowning in debt. The mortgage was 3 months behind. "Yes," he said, "you're staying here. You're safe now." Robert glanced at the clock. Nearly midnight. Christmas Day was minutes away. An idea formed. "Jake helped me with something." While the twins dozed on the couch wrapped in blankets, Robert and Jake worked quietly. They brought out the small, artificial tree Robert hadn't planned to put up this year, trying to save money. Jake hung ornaments while Robert strung lights. They pulled out stockings, including 2 that had belonged to Elizabeth. "Mom would want them to have these," Jake whispered. Robert blinked back tears. Yes, she would. They wrapped the few presents Robert had bought for Jake, then raided Jake's room for more things to wrap: books, toys, anything that might bring joy. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. Robert and Jake stepped back to admire their work. The tree glowed softly in the darkened living room presents, nestled underneath stockings hanging by the fireplace. "It's perfect, Dad," Jake whispered. "Let's get some sleep," Robert said quietly. "We'll let them discover it in the morning." They headed to bed, leaving the lights on. A few hours later, as dawn began to break on Christmas morning, Sophie stirred on the couch, her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft glow around her. Then she saw it. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. The Christmas tree, the lights, the presents, the stockings. "Lily," she whispered urgently, shaking her sister awake. "Lily, wake up, look." Lily's eyes fluttered open. When she saw what Sophie was seeing, her mouth fell open. They both stood slowly, as if moving too quickly might make it all disappear. They shuffled toward the tree, their bare feet padding softly on the carpet. Then they stopped, frozen in wonder. The tree glowed with warm white lights. Real presents sat underneath wrapped in colorful paper. Stockings hung by the fireplace. Snow fell softly outside the window. 4 mugs sat on the coffee table, ready for hot chocolate. Is this, is this real? Lily whispered, tears already filling her eyes. Footsteps on the stairs made them turn. Robert appeared with Jake right behind him. Merry Christmas, Robert said softly. I know yesterday was awful. I know you've been through things no child should ever experience, but right now you're safe. You're warm, you're fed, and you're part of this family. Sophie and Lily stared, mouths open. Tears began streaming down their faces. But these weren't tears of pain. Is this for us too? Lily whispered. This is for all of us, Jake said, taking their hands. Come on, you can open presents. The next hour was pure magic. The twins opened gifts with trembling hands, gasping with delight at every book, every stuffed animal, every coloring book. Jake showed them how to make hot chocolate mustaches. And for the first time, Robert heard them laugh. They watched an old Christmas movie together, all 4 piled on the couch under blankets. The twins ate cookies Jake had baked earlier that week. Slowly, gradually, some of the fear left their eyes. As the morning went on, Sophie and Lily were curled up on either side of Robert. Jake had his head on Robert's shoulder. Robert looked at these 3 children and made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whatever he had to sacrifice, he would keep them safe. Sometimes we don't get to choose these moments. They choose us, and what we do next defines who we really are. The days after Christmas blurred together in a whirlwind of phone calls and paperwork. Robert contacted Child Protective Services, then the police. A doctor examined the girls, documenting their injuries, their malnutrition, the signs of prolonged abuse. Linda Reynolds, a 50-year-old social worker with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, came to the house the day after Christmas. She sat at Robert's kitchen table taking notes as he recounted finding the girls and what they had told him. You did the right thing bringing them here instead of leaving them out there, Linda said. But I need to be honest with you about what comes next. It's complicated. Robert nodded. I figured it would be. The girls will need to be interviewed separately by law enforcement, by me, by a child psychologist. They'll need to tell their story multiple times, which can be traumatic in itself. And we'll need to investigate their aunt's home. Will they have to go back there? The thought made Robert's stomach twist. Linda's expression was grave. Not immediately. We can place them in emergency foster care while the investigation... No, Robert interrupted. They can stay here. I'll do whatever paperwork you need. Linda studied him. You understand what you're taking on 2 traumatized children, a lengthy legal process, possible confrontation with their relatives. And from what I understand, you're already in a difficult financial situation. Robert thought of the mortgage notice sitting on his desk, the final warning from the bank. He thought of the medical bills still piling up. He thought of Sophie and Lily laughing that morning over hot chocolate. I understand completely. Linda nodded slowly. I'll start the emergency placement paperwork. But Mr. Sullivan, you should know these cases can be difficult to prove. Without clear evidence beyond the children's testimony, many end with the children being returned to their original guardians. The statistics Linda shared were grim. Over 60% of children removed from homes due to abuse allegations eventually returned to those same homes due to insufficient evidence or system failures. Many abusers were skilled at manipulation, at presenting themselves as caring guardians when authorities were watching. I won't let that happen, Robert said firmly. Linda gave him a small, sad smile. I hope not, but prepare yourself for a fight. The twins remained skittish. They still called him Sir. They hoarded food in their room, eating carefully as if each meal might be their last. They flinched at sudden movements. Nightmares woke them screaming every night. Yet slowly things began to shift. Jake became their champion. He shared everything, taught them games, read them stories at night. The longing he'd always had for siblings poured into Sophie and Lily like water on parched earth. The twins started to trust. They began saying Mr. Robert instead of Sir. Sophie laughed at one of Jake's jokes. Lily asked if she could help make breakfast. They started acting like children instead of prisoners. But as they grew comfortable, they shared more stories that made Robert's blood boil. Sleeping in the unheated basement, being locked in closets for hours, the welts on their backs from being struck with a belt, going days with only one small meal, being forced to do all the housework, while their cousin did nothing. Dr. Helen Martinez examined the girls at the children's hospital, carefully documenting every bruise, every scar, every sign of malnutrition. Her findings were unambiguous. These children have been subjected to prolonged physical abuse and neglect, she told Robert as they sat in her office. The x-rays show evidence of previous fractures that were never properly treated. They're both significantly underweight for their age. The psychological trauma is evident in their behavior. I'm submitting my full report to Child Protective Services and the police. Detective Michael Garcia was assigned to the case. A 45-year-old veteran with 20 years on the force, he had seen his share of child abuse cases, but something about the twins' situation touched him personally. We're going to build the strongest case we can, he told Robert, but these cases can be challenging. The testimony of young children is sometimes questioned, especially against adults who can present well. Robert's woodworking shop had been understanding about his absences at first, but as days turned into weeks, his boss's patience wore thin. I need someone reliable, Sullivan, he said. You're one of my best craftsmen, but I can't hold your position if you're not here. I understand, Robert said. I just need to get through this initial period with the girls. There are interviews, doctor appointments. I get it, family comes first, but I've got orders to fill. Take another week, then either you're back full-time or I'll have to let you go. As Robert drove home, he calculated the remaining money in his checking account. Not enough for next month's mortgage payment, let alone utilities and food for 4 people. But the thought of sending Sophie and Lily away, of breaking the fragile trust they were building, was unthinkable. The police had not yet arrested Catherine Morris. They were building their case, gathering evidence, interviewing neighbors, but the process was frustratingly slow. Detective Garcia explained they needed to be thorough to ensure that when they moved, the case would be solid. One morning, Robert and Detective Garcia drove to the Morris home in an affluent neighborhood with manicured lawns and luxury cars and driveways. The contrast to Robert's modest, struggling neighborhood couldn't have been more stark. Catherine Morris opened the door, a tall, immaculately dressed woman in her late 30s with cold eyes and a practiced smile. Her husband Andrew stood slightly behind her, a man whose face seemed permanently set in an expression of quiet anxiety. Mr. Sullivan, Catherine's voice dripped with disdain. I understand you've kidnapped my nieces. Detective Garcia stepped forward, showing his badge. Mrs. Morris, I'm Detective Michael Garcia. We're here to ask you some questions about your nieces Sophie and Lily. My poor, troubled nieces, Catherine sighed dramatically. They've always been difficult, Detective. Prone to lying, stealing, hurting themselves for attention. We've tried everything, therapy, special schools. Nothing seems to help. Robert's hands clenched into fists. The woman's performance was flawless, her tone perfectly calibrated to convey concern rather than guilt. You're claiming an 8-year-old girl gave herself a broken rib? Detective Garcia's tone was professionally skeptical. Or the belt marks documented by the medical examiner. Children their age play rough, Catherine said smoothly, and they've always been clumsy. As for the belt marks, I have no idea what you're talking about. May we see these supposed reports? As the detective continued his questioning, Robert noticed a boy of about 12 watching from the top of the stairs. Noah, the cousin the twins had mentioned. The boy's eyes were wan and uncomfortable. Catherine noticed Robert's gaze and immediately called out, Noah, darling, go to your room, please. The adults are talking. The house was immaculate, expensive. Family photos on the walls showed Catherine, Andrew, and Noah perfectly posed, perfectly happy. Sophie and Lily appeared in none of them. We'd like to see the girls' room, Detective Garcia said. Catherine hesitated for just a moment. Of course. This way. She led them upstairs to a small room at the end of the hall. It contained 2 narrow beds with thin blankets, a single dresser, and nothing else. No toys, no books, no decorations of any kind. It looked more like a prison cell than a little girl's bedroom. They never take care of their things, Catherine explained. We've bought them toys, books, but they destroy everything. It's easier this way. Detective Garcia took photos, made notes. Robert could see the skepticism in his expression, but Catherine had an answer for everything. Andrew said nothing throughout the visit, just nodded along with his wife's explanations. As they were leaving, Catherine's perfectly composed facade cracked just for an instant. Those girls have been nothing but a burden since my sister died. Sarah always was the favorite, you know. The pretty one, the successful one, the one everyone loved. Then she took Thomas from me. He was mine first. Did you know that? We were together for years before Sarah swept in with her perfect face and perfect laugh and stole him away. Her voice had risen, her eyes flashing with a hatred that seemed to come from somewhere deep and festering. Andrew placed a warning hand on her arm, which she shook off. Then they had to go and die and leave me with their brats. Two little copies of Sarah looking at me every day with her eyes reminding me of everything I should have had, everything she took from me. Detective Garcia was recording the conversation. Robert stood absolutely still, afraid that any movement might break the spell, might make Catherine realize what she was revealing. So they needed to be taught some discipline, some gratitude. Catherine continued, her voice becoming eerily calm again. They needed to learn that life isn't fair, that you don't always get what you want. That's an important lesson, don't you think, Detective? I think we've heard enough for today, Detective Garcia said quietly. As they walked back to the car, Robert felt ill. She admitted it. She basically admitted she abuses them because they remind her of her sister. She implied it, the detective corrected, but it's not a clear confession, and she'll deny saying it with that intent. She's smart, careful. But we've got it on record now, and it does help our case. She's going to get away with it, isn't she? Robert's voice was hollow. Not if I can help it, Detective Garcia said firmly. But these cases are never straightforward. We need more evidence, more witnesses. Right now, it's the girl's word against hers. Back home, Robert found Jake teaching the twins how to play checkers. The sight of them, heads bent together over the board laughing at something Jake had said, brought a lump to his throat. These children deserved to be safe, to be happy. He'd move heaven and earth to make that happen. That night, Robert received a notice of termination from the woodworking shop. His boss had been patient, but the business couldn't wait any longer. In the same mail pile was another notice from the bank. Foreclosure proceedings would begin in 30 days. He sat at the kitchen table long after the children had gone to bed, bills spread before him, trying to find a solution that wasn't there. The small amount of savings he'd managed to build back after Elizabeth's medical bills was dwindling rapidly. He'd been picking up odd carpentry jobs on weekends, but it wasn't nearly enough. Elizabeth, he whispered to the empty kitchen, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough. The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. The district attorney had decided there was enough evidence to move forward with charges against Catherine Morris, but the judge would determine whether the case would go to trial and, critically, where the girls would stay during the proceedings. Robert, dressed in his best clothes, the same suit he'd worn to Elizabeth's funeral, now slightly loose on his frame. The twins wore dresses Linda had brought from a charity donation, their hair neatly braided. Jake insisted on coming too, refusing to stay with a neighbor as Robert had suggested. They're my sisters now, Jake said, with the simple certainty of a 10-year-old. I should be there. The courtroom was small and stuffy. Robert sat with the twins, who held his hands so tightly his fingers went numb. Catherine sat at the defense table looking confident, almost smug. Andrew sat beside her, eyes downcast. Their lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a tailored suit, spent the morning dismantling the twins' testimony, suggesting they were confused, traumatized, projecting their pain onto a well-meaning aunt. The judge was reviewing his notes, clearly preparing to make a ruling, when Catherine's lawyer called Andrew to the stand. Catherine's expression flickered with surprise, then concern. Andrew Morris took the oath, his face pale but determined. He glanced once at his wife, then fixed his gaze on a point at the back of the courtroom. Mr. Morris, can you tell the court about your niece's living conditions in your home? Catherine's lawyer asked, clearly expecting a supportive testimony. Andrew took a deep breath. Sophie and Lily were not treated well in our home. His voice was quiet but clear. My wife, Catherine, was cruel to them. She would withhold food, force them to do excessive chores, hit them with a belt. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Catherine's face hardened into a mask of fury. Objection, her lawyer shouted. Your Honor, my client's husband has not been properly prepared for this testimony. I request a recess. Mr. Morris, the judge said, ignoring the lawyer, are you testifying that your wife abused your nieces? Yes, Your Honor. Andrew's voice grew stronger. I've been a coward. I've allowed it to happen for years. I told myself I was protecting my son, but what kind of example was I setting? What kind of man watches two little girls suffer and does nothing? Catherine's lawyer was frantically whispering to her, but she ignored him, her eyes fixed on her husband with a look of pure hatred. I have evidence, Andrew continued. Security camera footage from our home. I've been recording for months. I couldn't bring myself to intervene directly, but I couldn't destroy the evidence either. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive, which he handed to the bailiff. It's all there. Time-stamped videos showing Catherine hitting the girls, forcing them outside in the cold, screaming at them, denying them food. The judge ordered a recess to review the new evidence. As the court cleared, Robert noticed a small figure slip into the back row, Noah, the Morris's son. The boy looked terrified but determined. When court resumed an hour later, the judge's expression was grim. I've reviewed the evidence provided by Mr. Morris. What I've seen is deeply disturbing and constitutes clear evidence of child abuse and neglect. Mrs. Morris, you are hereby remanded to custody pending trial. Bail is set at $500,000. As the bailiff approached, Catherine's composure finally broke. They deserved everything they got, she shrieked, pointing at the twins who shrank against Robert. Little thieves of everything that should have been mine. Sarah always got everything, the love, the man, the perfect life. I was just teaching them what life really is. The courtroom was silent except for Catherine's ragged breathing as she was led away. Andrew stood walking slowly toward Robert and the girls. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I should have stopped her years ago. I should have reported her the first time I saw her hit them. My silence made me complicit in her cruelty. He knelt down in front of Sophie and Lily, who watched him with wary eyes. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. You deserved an adult who would protect you, and I failed. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm going to do everything I can now to make it right. Noah approached cautiously, standing beside his father. I'm sorry too, he said, his voice small. I was scared to say anything. But I have nightmares about what Mom did to you. I can't live with this anymore. The judge granted Robert temporary custody of the twins, pending a full investigation of their case. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a start. As they left the courthouse, the twins clung to Robert. You did it, Sophie whispered. You saved us, Mr. Robert. We all did it together, Robert said softly. You were brave enough to tell the truth. Andrew was brave enough to finally do the right thing, and we all made sure justice was served. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it requires someone to finally find the courage to do what's right. 3 months later, Robert sat at his kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. The adoption forms were complex and intimidating, but he worked through them methodically. Catherine had been denied bail after her outburst in court. Her trial was scheduled for the following month. Andrew had filed for divorce and was cooperating fully with the prosecution. The twins were transformed. They laughed freely now, called him Mr. Robert without hesitation. The nightmares had lessened. They'd gained weight. Their bruises had faded. But Robert was drowning. He'd found a new job at a smaller workshop with lower pay. He'd taken on weekend bookkeeping jobs, cut expenses to nothing, sold anything of value. The kids never went hungry, never lacked essentials, but Robert often skipped meals himself. The bank had given a final extension on the house, but foreclosure was now just weeks away. Jake came into the kitchen, his expression serious for a 10-year-old. Dad, are we going to have to move? Robert hesitated, then nodded. Yes, buddy, but we'll find a good place, I promise, something smaller that we can afford. But we'll all still be together, right? You, me, Sophie and Lily. Absolutely. On this, Robert was completely certain. We're a family now. That doesn't change no matter where we live. Jake seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to the living room where the twins were drawing. Robert returned to the adoption forms, fighting exhaustion. He'd been working 16-hour days trying to keep everything afloat. A knock at the door startled him. It was late past 8 o'clock. Robert answered cautiously. A well-dressed man in his 50s stood on the porch, briefcase in hand. Mr. Sullivan, my name is James Wilson. I was the attorney for Thomas and Sarah Brooks, Sophie and Lily's parents. I've been searching for the girls for 5 years. Robert's heart sunk. Was someone trying to take them away? But Mr. Weston's expression was kind and almost relieved. May I come in? This is going to sound unusual, but I promise it's good news. Inside, Mr. Wilson set his briefcase on the table and pulled out a thick folder. When Thomas and Sarah died in that accident, they left behind a substantial trust fund for their daughters. I was named the trustee, but there was a problem. Catherine refused to complete the legal guardianship paperwork. She took the girls, but she never officially became their legal guardian. Without that documentation, I couldn't access the trust or even confirm where the children were. He opened the folder showing Robert official documents. For 5 years, I've been monitoring every child welfare case in this state and 3 surrounding states. I've been checking foster care records, adoption proceedings, hospital admissions, anywhere these girls might appear in the system. I hired a private investigator. I filed missing persons alerts. I even contacted every elementary school in a 100-mile radius. Mr. Wilson's voice grew thick with emotion. When your temporary custody filing entered the public records database, that triggered an alert in my monitoring system. After 5 years of searching, I finally found them. Robert stared, hardly daring to believe it. The trust. What does it provide for? It was established to ensure Sophie and Lily would never want for anything. Thomas was from old money and a successful investment banker. Sarah was a dedicated pediatrician. Together, they built something substantial for their daughter's future. He slid papers across the table. The full amount, which I'm not at liberty to disclose until the girls turn 18, is held in trust and invested conservatively. But as their legal guardian, you're entitled to monthly distributions for their education, healthcare, housing, food, clothing, and general welfare. The amount is calculated to provide them with a comfortable middle-class life. Robert picked up the papers with trembling hands. The monthly amount listed made his eyes blur with tears. It wasn't extravagant wealth, but it was enough. Enough to pay off his crushing debts. Enough to keep the house. Enough to stop skipping meals. Enough to finally breathe. Enough to give all 3 children the life they deserved. There's one more thing, Mr. Wilson said, gently pulling out a sealed envelope. Sarah wrote letters to her daughters before she died. She and Thomas had a feeling about that trip, called it intuition. She wanted them to have these when they were old enough. I also have the location of Thomas and Sarah's graves. When you're ready, perhaps you might want to take the girls to visit. Robert looked at this man who'd spent 5 years searching, who'd never given up. Mr. Wilson, thank you. Thank you for not forgetting them. The attorney's eyes glistened. How could I? Thomas was my best friend. Sarah was like a sister to me. When they died, I made a promise to find their girls and protect them. I wish I'd found them sooner before Catherine. You found them when they needed to be found, Robert said firmly, and they're safe now. That's what matters. 1 month later, on a bright spring morning, Robert drove Jake and the twins to the cemetery. The grass was green, dotted with wildflowers. The headstone was simple but beautiful. Thomas and Sarah Brooks' beloved parents. Gone too soon. The twins knelt, placing white lilies on the grass. Hi, Mom and Dad, Sophie said softly. We're Sophie and Lily. You probably don't remember us. We were so small when you left, but we want you to know we're okay now. We have a new dad. His name is Robert. He saved us. He found us on Christmas Eve when we were freezing in the snow. He brought us home and gave us the best Christmas we ever had. And we have a brother too, Lily said. Jake. He's the best brother in the whole world. He shares everything with us and makes us laugh. We're safe now, Mom, Sophie whispered. We're finally safe and we're happy. We wish you were here, but we think you'd be proud of us, and we hope you're proud of Dad too. He gave up so much to keep us. Robert stood back, tears streaming down his face. Jake leaned against him, crying too. The twins rose and ran to them, and the 4 of them stood there, a family born not of blood, but of choice and courage and love. Thank you, Robert whispered to the sky, to Elizabeth, to Thomas and Sarah, to whatever force had guided him down that snowy road. Thank you for trusting me with them. As they walked back to the car, Lily slipped her hand into Robert's. Dad, Robert's heart swelled. It was the first time either of the twins had called him that. Yes, sweetheart. Can we come back and visit again? Robert squeezed her hand, his heart full. Any time you want, honey. Sophie took his other hand. And Dad, thank you for everything. For saving us, for loving us, for making us a family. Robert knelt down, pulling all 3 children into a fierce hug. You don't need to thank me. Being your dad, being part of this family, is the greatest gift I could ever receive. You three saved me just as much as I saved you. As they drove home, the radio playing softly, Jake chattering about a school project, the twins giggling in the back seat, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. They'd all been broken by loss, by cruelty, by circumstances beyond their control. But somehow in finding each other, they'd become whole again. And that was the greatest Christmas miracle of all. Spring turned to summer, and with the arrival of warmer weather, the trauma of that snow-filled Christmas Eve began to feel distant, like a half-remembered nightmare. But for Detective Michael Garcia, the case remained immediate and pressing. He sat across from Robert in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse, manila folders spread between them. Catherine's trial is set for August 15th. The DA is confident about the case, especially with Andrew's testimony and the video evidence. Garcia pushed a document across the table. This is the formal list of charges. Multiple counts of child abuse, neglect, child endangerment, criminal starvation. She's looking at a minimum of 15 years. Robert scanned the pages, a muscle working in his jaw. The clinical language couldn't capture the reality of what Sophie and Lily had endured. What about Andrew Will? He faced charges too. Reduced charges. His cooperation has been crucial, and the DA recognizes he was also victimized by Catherine in many ways. Emotional and psychological abuse leaves scars too, just not ones you can photograph for evidence. Robert nodded slowly, remembering the shadows in Andrew's eyes, the way his shoulders hunched, as though permanently expecting a blow. And Noah, he's been assigned a therapist specializing in children who've witnessed domestic violence. Andrew's attorney is working to ensure Catherine has no contact with the boy. Garcia collected the papers, tucking them back into their folders with practiced precision. How are the girls doing? A rare smile crossed Robert's face. Better. They're gaining weight. The nightmares are less frequent. They laugh more. Last weekend we went fishing at Lake Harriet. Jake taught them how to bait hooks. You should have heard them shrieking about touching worms. The memory warmed him, Sophie's determined concentration as she threaded the worm, Lily's mixture of disgust and fascination, Jake's patient demonstration. Normal childhood moments that had been denied to the twins for so long. And the trust fund, is that helping with the logistics? It's made everything possible. Robert couldn't fully express how the financial support had transformed their situation. The mortgage was current now. The refrigerator stayed full. The girls had new clothes that actually fit books of their own proper beds instead of the air mattresses they'd been sleeping on. The first disbursement paid off the medical bills from Elizabeth's treatments. I can breathe again. And I've started a small woodworking business from home so I can be there for the kids. Garcia nodded approvingly. You're doing right by those girls. Not everyone would have stepped up the way you did. Robert brushed off the compliment. Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true. Garcia's expression darkened momentarily. I've worked child protection for 15 years. The things I've seen people do and not do for children would destroy your faith in humanity. The detective gathered his files, preparing to leave. One more thing. Catherine's been making calls from jail, reaching out to former friends, distant relatives, trying to build support for her version of events. Keep an eye out for unfamiliar vehicles in your neighborhood, strangers asking questions. Probably nothing but abusers like Catherine rarely go down without dragging everyone they can into their delusions. A chill ran through Robert despite the summer heat. He'd naively assumed that with Catherine behind bars, the danger was past. The reminder that she still had power, still had reach, disturbed him deeply. Linda Reynolds proved to be a godsend throughout the adoption process. The veteran social worker navigated the bureaucratic labyrinth, with Robert explaining each form, each hearing, each home study with patience and clarity. The judge will want to see that you've made appropriate accommodations, she explained during one of her home visits. The girls need their own room, their own beds, their own space for clothes and personal items. Robert had converted his home office into a bedroom for the twins, painting the walls a soft yellow at their request. Jake had helped assemble the furniture, twin beds with matching comforters, a shared dresser, bookshelves already filling with library books and stories the girls were writing themselves. What about school? Linda made notes on her clipboard. They'll need to enroll for the fall semester. I've spoken with the principal at Jake's school. He's arranging placement testing next month to see if they'll need any special services. Linda nodded approvingly. In therapy, Dr. Winters sees them twice a week. She says they are making progress, but it's going to be a long road. Linda set down her clipboard. You've thought of everything. How are you holding up through all this? The question caught Robert off guard. So few people asked about him. I'm managing. That's not an answer. Linda's eyes were kind, but unflinching. You can't pour from an empty cup, Robert. The girls need you whole and healthy. The truth was, Robert hadn't slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since Christmas. Every night he woke to check on the children to make sure they were still breathing, still safe. The weight of responsibility pressed constantly on his chest. 3 young lives depended entirely on him now. I'll be fine once Catherine's convicted, once the adoption is finalized, once everything is certain. Linda's expression told him she didn't quite believe him, but she didn't push further. Later that week, the twins had their first mandatory supervised visit with Andrew and Noah. Robert drove them to the Family Services Center, noticing how quiet they became as they approached the building. You don't have to say or do anything you don't want to, he reminded them. I'll be right outside the room the whole time. Sophie, always the more outspoken of the two, frowned. Why do we have to see them at all? Uncle Andrew never stopped Aunt Catherine. He's trying to make that right now, Robert explained gently. And Noah is your cousin. He cares about you both. Lily stared at her hands. Noah used to sneak us food sometimes, when his mom wasn't looking. The meeting room was sterile and uninviting beige walls, a rectangular table with chairs, a few children's books and toys on a shelf in the corner. Andrew and Noah were already inside when they arrived, both looking as uncomfortable as the twins felt. Robert took a seat in the hallway, watching through the observation window as the social worker facilitated the awkward reunion. He couldn't hear what was being said, but he could read the body language. Andrew's hesitant gestures, Noah's tentative smile, the twins' rigid posture, gradually relaxing as the visit continued. After 40 minutes, the door opened. The twins emerged, followed by Andrew, Noah, and the social worker. To Robert's surprise, Sophie was clutching a small photo album. What's that? He asked as they walked to the car. Pictures of our mom and dad, Lily answered softly. Uncle Andrew saved them after Aunt Catherine threw all the others away. In the photos, Thomas and Sarah Brooks smiled from various locations, a beach, a mountain trail, their wedding day. The resemblance between Sarah and the twins was striking. Same heart-shaped face, same wide-set eyes, same subtle dimple on the right cheek when they smiled. They look so happy, Sophie whispered, tracing her mother's face with a fingertip. Robert felt a pang of something unexpected. Not jealousy exactly, but a sharp awareness that these little girls had another family, another history that preceded him. It was easy to forget sometimes that they hadn't always been his. The next photo showed Sarah heavily pregnant, Thomas kneeling beside her, with his hands on her rounded belly, both laughing at something off camera. That's you two in there, Robert said gently. They were so excited to meet you. How do you know? Lily looked up at him, her eyes hungry for this connection to her past. You can see it in their faces. That's pure joy, that's love. The girls took turns sleeping with the photo album under their pillows for weeks afterward. As July melted into August, preparations for Catherine's trial intensified. The prosecutor, Ashley Wright, met with Robert and the twins multiple times to prepare their testimony. Despite her youth, she couldn't be older than 35. Ashley carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her business intimately. I want the girls to be as comfortable as possible, but I also need to prepare them for what Catherine's attorney will try to do, she explained to Robert during one preparation session. He'll attempt to discredit their memories, suggest they're confused or coached. It will feel like an attack. Robert bristled. They're children. Haven't they been through enough? Yes, they have. Ashley's voice was firm but compassionate. That's exactly why we need to prepare them. I won't let them be blindsided. The practice sessions were difficult. Ashley asked the kinds of questions Catherine's defense would likely pose, deliberately trying to confuse the girls, to make them doubt their own memories. Sophie often responded with anger, Lily with tears. Robert had to fight the urge to intervene to protect them from this additional trauma. They're stronger than they look, Ashley reassured him after one particularly tough session. Children who survive abuse develop resilience most adults can't imagine. Trust them to handle this. 2 days before the trial was set to begin, Robert received a phone call from Andrew. The man's voice was tight with anxiety. Catherine's mother arrived in town yesterday. She's been calling me non-stop, demanding to see Noah, insisting that Catherine is innocent. I thought you should know she mentioned going to your house to see the twins. Robert's blood ran cold. She knows where we live. Catherine probably told her. I'm so sorry, Robert. I should have warned you sooner about Virginia. She's cut from the same cloth as Catherine. Manipulative, vindictive. Robert immediately called Detective Garcia, who promised to increase patrol frequency in the neighborhood. That night, Robert checked the locks 3 times before trying to sleep. He'd installed a security system with the trust fund, money cameras, motion sensors, direct connection to the police department, but technology suddenly seemed inadequate. Protection against this new threat. The morning of the trial dawned clear and hot, the August sun beating down on the courthouse steps. Robert had carefully selected outfits for the twins, simple dresses that made them look their age, not too formal, not too casual. Jake insisted on wearing his only suit, a navy blue ensemble he'd outgrown slightly in the past year. I want the judge to see we're a real family, he explained with the earnest logic of a child. The courtroom was packed. Catherine's trial had garnered significant local media attention. Robert guided the twins through the crowd, keeping his body between them and the curious onlookers. They found seats near the front behind the prosecution table where Ashley was organizing her notes. Catherine entered flanked by bailiffs, her hair arranged in a demure style, her outfit a modest beige dress clearly selected to project maternal respectability. Robert felt the twins stiffen beside him, their small hands gripping his with sudden intensity. It's okay, he whispered. She can't hurt you anymore. The trial proceedings began with opening statements. Ashley went first, her voice clear and commanding as she outlined the state's case against Catherine Morris. This is not a complicated case, she began. This is a case about a woman who systematically abused, neglected, and terrorized 2 young girls placed in her care. 2 girls who lost their parents at age 3 and were then subjected to 5 years of calculated cruelty by the very person who should have protected them. Catherine's attorney, a sleek man with silver temples named Philip Bardwell, presented a starkly different narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about perception and misunderstanding. My client took in her orphan nieces despite financial and emotional challenges. She provided structure and discipline to 2 traumatized children who exhibited serious behavioral issues. Were mistakes made, perhaps? But the prosecution's characterization of my client as some sort of monster is not only inaccurate, it's cruel. Robert watched Catherine throughout these statements. Her expression remained carefully composed, occasionally nodding in agreement with her lawyer, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. The performance was flawless. The prosecution called their first witness, Dr. Helen Martinez, the physician who had examined the twins after their rescue. She detailed her findings clinically, but with barely concealed anger. Sophie presented with a recently healed fracture of the 7th rib that had not received medical attention. Both girls showed multiple contusions in various stages of healing. Both were significantly underweight in the bottom 5th percentile for their age. Their vitamin levels indicated prolonged malnutrition. Lily had an untreated ear infection that had begun to affect her hearing. Photographs were displayed on a large screen, clinical images of the twins' injuries, their protruding ribs, the dark bruises against pale skin. Robert heard several jurors gasp. Jake, sitting beside him, turned away from the images, burying his face against Robert's arm. Bardwell cross-examined aggressively, suggesting the injuries could have been self-inflicted or accidental, that the malnutrition could have been due to picky eating, common in children. Isn't it true, doctor, that many children refuse to eat certain foods? That forcing healthy options can seem like starvation to a child who only wants candy? Martinez's eyes flashed. These children weren't refusing filet mignon, Mr. Bardwell. They were being systematically denied basic nutrition. The pattern of injuries is consistent with intentional harm, not accidents. And no child gives themselves a broken rib. The day continued with a parade of witnesses, neighbors who had noticed the twins' condition, but never reported it, teachers who had documented concerns that were never addressed, the police officers who had investigated the case. By late afternoon, Robert could see the jury's expressions hardening against Catherine. The following day brought Andrew to the stand. He looked haggard, older than his 42 years, but his voice was steady as he recounted years of witnessing Catherine's treatment of the twins. At first, I tried to rationalize it. I told myself she was just strict, that she was doing her best with children who weren't hers. But over time, the truth became impossible to ignore. She was punishing them for existing, for looking like Sarah, for being reminders of what she believed she should have had. "And you did nothing to stop this abuse?" Ashley asked, her tone carefully neutral. Andrew's face crumpled. "I made excuses. I told myself I was protecting Noah. I slipped the girls extra food when I could, treated their injuries, secretly tried to intervene without confronting Catherine directly. But the truth is I was a coward. I failed those girls every day for 5 years. What changed? Why come forward now?" "My son." Andrew glanced at Noah sitting in the gallery. "He told me that he was having nightmares about what happened to his cousins, that he couldn't live with it anymore. His courage shamed me into finding my own." During cross-examination, Bardwell tried to paint Andrew as an unreliable witness, a husband betraying his wife to save himself, a man making false accusations to gain favorable treatment from prosecutors. "Isn't it true that you're divorcing my client and seeking full custody of your son? That testifying against her serves your personal interest?" Andrew met the attorney's gaze directly. "I'm divorcing Catherine because she's abusive and dangerous. I'm testifying because it's the truth and because those girls deserve justice. I deserve nothing." The video evidence came next, dozens of clips from security cameras Andrew had secretly installed throughout the house. The footage was damning. Catherine screaming at the twins for minor infractions. Catherine striking Sophie across the face for dropping a dish. Catherine forcing the girls to kneel on raw rice in the corner for hours. Catherine locking them in a basement closet without light. Catherine denying them food while she and Noah ate full meals at the table. With each clip, Catherine's carefully constructed facade crumbled further. She stopped making eye contact with the jury. Her shoulders hunched forward. Her tissue dabbing became more frantic. The prosecution calls Noah Morris to the stand. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Calling a child witness, especially one testifying against his mother, was unusual and risky. Noah approached the witness stand slowly, his small frame nearly swallowed by the large chair. Ashley approached him gently. "Noah, can you tell us what you saw happening to your cousins in your home?" The boy's voice was barely audible at first. "Mom would get really mad at them, all the time, even when they didn't do anything wrong." "Can you give us an example?" "Once Lily got sick and threw up on the kitchen floor. Mom made her sleep in the basement with no blanket even though it was winter and really cold down there. She said Lily did it on purpose to get attention." "Did you ever see your mother hit Sophie and Lily?" Noah nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "With her hands, with belts, with whatever was close by. One time with the metal end of a fly swatter." "And how did that make you feel?" "Scared." The words seemed to catch in his throat. "Scared she'd do it to me too. And sad. And mad at myself for not helping them more." Catherine's attorney chose not to cross-examine Noah, perhaps recognizing that challenging a 12-year-old boy's testimony against his mother would only damage their case further. The most difficult day came when the twins themselves took the stand. They testified separately, each describing in painful detail the years of abuse they had endured. Lily cried through much of her testimony, her voice sometimes dropping to a whisper. Sophie spoke more defiantly, her gaze occasionally moving to Catherine with a hardness no 9-year-old should possess. "She told us our parents didn't want us," Sophie recounted, "that they died to get away from us, that nobody would ever want us." During a recess, Robert found the twins huddled together in a private room set aside for witnesses. Lily was still crying, Sophie holding her sister protectively. "You both did so well," Robert knelt before them. "I am so proud of you." "She was looking at me," Lily whispered, "the whole time, staring." "She can't hurt you anymore," Robert promised, gathering them both in his arms. "Never again." The defense began their case the following week. Catherine took the stand, presenting herself as a misunderstood aunt, doing her best with difficult, traumatized children. "Sophie and Lily came to us already damaged," she explained, her voice quavering with practiced emotion. "They had behavioral issues, emotional outbursts. They would hurt themselves and blame me. They would refuse to eat, then tell others they were being starved." "And the video evidence," her attorney prompted. "Selective editing," Catherine sniffed. "Moments taken out of context." You're not seeing the hours before when they were having violent tantrums, breaking things, hurting Noah. Any parent knows there are moments when discipline must be firm. During cross-examination, Ashley methodically dismantled Catherine's narrative, pointing out inconsistencies, confronting her with the medical evidence, the videos, the testimony of multiple witnesses. Mrs. Morris, in one of these videos, we clearly see you denying food to Sophie and Lily while you and your family eat. The girls hadn't misbehaved. They simply asked for breakfast. How is starving children firm discipline? Catherine's composure began to crack. They needed to learn gratitude. I took them in when no one else would. They owed me respect. Respect or complete submission. Let's be honest, Mrs. Morris. This wasn't about discipline. This was about jealousy, wasn't it? Jealousy of your sister? Objection. Bardwell was on his feet. Counsel is testifying. I'll rephrase, Ashley said smoothly. Mrs. Morris, did you resent your sister Sarah's relationship with Thomas Brooks? Catherine's face flushed. That's irrelevant. Is it multiple witnesses have testified that you frequently compared the twins to their mother, that you seemed angered by their resemblance to her? Sarah took everything from me. The words burst from Catherine with sudden vehemence. She always got everything she wanted. Thomas was mine first. We dated for 3 years. Then Sarah swoops in with her perfect face and her perfect laugh, and suddenly I'm forgotten. Then they have their perfect little twins and their perfect life, while I'm stuck with a husband who can't even make partner at his firm in a house half the size of theirs. The courtroom fell silent. Catherine seemed to realize what she had revealed, her hand flying to her mouth too late. So when Sarah and Thomas died, Ashley continued calmly, and you took in their daughters, was that an act of love or an opportunity for revenge against a sister who couldn't defend herself anymore? Philip Bardwell called a few character witnesses. Catherine's pastor, a neighbor, a colleague from her charity committee, all of whom described her as a dedicated mother, an active community member, a generous friend. But their testimony felt hollow against the mountain of evidence and Catherine's own damning words. During closing arguments, Ashley stood directly before the jury, her voice filled with quiet conviction. The evidence in this case speaks for itself. For 5 years, Catherine Morris subjected her nieces to persistent physical and emotional abuse. She starved them. She beat them. She locked them away. She told them they were worthless. And she did this not because they misbehaved, not because she lacked resources or support, but because they reminded her of a sister she envied, because punishing them was the closest she could come to punishing Sarah. She walked closer to the jury box. Sophie and Lily survived because of their incredible resilience, because they had each other, and ultimately because a stranger found them in the snow and chose to help instead of looking away. Justice demands that Catherine Morris be held accountable for the suffering she inflicted on 2 children who had already lost everything. Justice demands a guilty verdict. Bardwell's closing argument emphasized reasonable doubt, the challenges of raising traumatized children, the stress Catherine had been under, the possibility that the twins had exaggerated or misunderstood normal discipline. But his words seemed to fall on increasingly skeptical ears. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning their verdict. The courtroom hushed as the jurors filed back in their faces solemn. Catherine sat rigidly at the defense table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge's voice echoed in the silent room. The 4 persons stood. We have your honor. On the charge of child abuse in the 1st degree, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty. On the charge of criminal neglect of a child, how do you find guilty? The litany continued through all 15 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. With each pronouncement, Catherine seemed to shrink further into herself, her face a mask of disbelief and growing rage. When the final count was read, Catherine suddenly lunged toward the prosecution table, her voice a primal scream. They're liars. They've always been liars, just like Sarah, always lying, always taking what's mine. Bailiffs restrained her quickly, but not before everyone in the courtroom had witnessed her true nature, the mask of respectability completely abandoned. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. Remove the defendant. We will proceed with sentencing at a later date. As Catherine was led away, still shouting accusations, Robert pulled the twins close, shielding them from the spectacle. Jake wrapped his arms around his sisters from the other side, creating a protective circle. "It's over," Robert whispered. "It's really over." But as they left the courthouse, a woman's voice cut through the crowd. "This isn't finished. Those girls belong with family, not some stranger." Virginia Morris, Catherine's mother, stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, her face contorted with the same rage they had just witnessed in her daughter. Two sheriff's deputies moved to intercept her before she could approach Robert and the children. "Those are my granddaughters. You have no right to keep them from me." Robert hurried the children to their car, ignoring the woman's shouts and the flutter of reporters trying to capture the confrontation. As they drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror at the twins' pale faces. "Don't worry about her. She can't hurt you either." But the incident left a shadow over what should have been a day of relief and closure. The battle, it seemed, wasn't entirely over. A week later, Catherine was sentenced to 15 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 10. The judge's comments were scathing, describing her actions as calculated cruelty against defenseless children and a profound betrayal of the most basic duty of care. Robert expected to feel triumph or at least relief, but instead found himself emotionally exhausted. The twins, too, seemed subdued rather than celebratory. The trial had forced them to relive their trauma in excruciating detail, to confront Catherine directly, to have their suffering dissected by strangers. Healing would not be instantaneous, even with justice served. Dr. Winters, the children's therapist, had warned him about this. Legal victory doesn't automatically translate to emotional resolution, she'd explained. The girls will need time to process everything that's happened to understand that they're truly safe now. The adoption proceedings continued to inch forward. Each step completed felt like a victory. The home study approved, the background checks cleared, the financial review accepted. But the process was agonizingly slow, each form generating 3 more, each approval requiring additional documentation. Meanwhile, Virginia Morris refused to disappear quietly. She filed a petition for grandparental visitation rights, claiming that Robert was alienating the girls from their biological family. The petition was weak. Virginia had never once visited the twins during the 5 years they lived with Catherine, had never sent birthday cards or Christmas gifts, had never shown any interest in their welfare until now. "It's a nuisance filing," Linda assured Robert. "The court will almost certainly deny it, especially given Catherine's conviction. But it does mean another hearing, more paperwork." Robert tried to shield the children from these continuing legal battles, but they were perceptive. They noticed his increased stress, the late nights spent reviewing documents, the hushed phone calls with lawyers. "Is Grandma Morris going to take us away?" Lily asked one evening as Robert tucked her into bed. The question pierced him. "No, sweetheart, absolutely not. She's just making noise because she's angry about the trial. The judge won't let her anywhere near you. Promise." Her small hand gripped his with surprising strength. "I promise. Nothing and no one will ever take you away from this family." The hearing for Virginia's petition was scheduled for late September. Robert arrived at the courthouse with Linda Reynolds and James Wilson, who had offered his legal expertise pro bono. Virginia sat across the aisle, accompanied by a thin, nervous-looking attorney who appeared fresh out of law school. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed the petition quickly. "Mrs. Morris, I see nothing in this filing that convinces me that visitation would be in these children's best interest. You had no relationship with them before their removal from your daughter's home. You've presented no evidence that Mr. Sullivan is unfit or that the children desire contact with you. Furthermore, given your daughter's conviction for abusing these same children, the court has serious concerns about your own judgment and potential influence." Virginia stood abruptly. "Those girls are my blood. He's nobody to them, just some man who found them in the snow. I raised Catherine to respect family above all else." "Yes, and we've all seen how that turned out," the judge interrupted coldly. "Petition denied. Mr. Sullivan, you're free to continue with the adoption process without further interference from Mrs. Morris." Outside the courtroom, Virginia cornered Robert as he spoke with his attorneys. Her face was twisted with the same hatred he'd seen in Catherine. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Those girls belong with real family, not with some widowed carpenter playing hero. Catherine told me all about you barely keeping your head above water, living in that shabby little house. What kind of life is that for Brooke's children? They come from money, from class. Robert stared at her, suddenly understanding the true motivation behind her petition. Not love for her granddaughters, but access to the trust fund that came with them. This was never about the girls. This was about the money. Virginia's expression confirmed his suspicion. That trust belongs in the family. Sarah would have wanted it managed properly, not squandered by someone like you. Someone like me, Robert felt a calm certainty settle over him. Someone who found two freezing, starving children and brought them home instead of calling the authorities and walking away. Someone who held them through nightmares and doctor visits and court testimonies. Someone who loves them for who they are, not for what they're worth. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You will never get near those girls or their trust fund. I suggest you return to whatever rock you crawled out from under and stay there. Because if you try to contact them, if you come near our home, if you do anything to disrupt the life we're building, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you regret it. Virginia blanched, unused to being confronted directly. She retreated, muttering threats, but Robert could see the defeat in her eyes. This battle at least was over. That evening, as Robert prepared dinner, Jake approached him with unusual seriousness. Dad, I've been thinking. Sophie and Lily need a real last name. Our last name. Robert paused, wooden spoon in hand. They will, buddy, once the adoption is finalized. But that's still months away. And they're already our family. They should be Sullivans now. The simple logic of childhood, Robert thought with a smile. If only the legal system worked with such clarity and conviction. What do you think, girls? He called to the twins who were setting the table. Would you like to start using Sullivan now, even though it's not official yet? The question hung in the air. Robert realized he'd never actually asked them directly about taking his name. He'd assumed they would want to, but perhaps that was presumptuous. Perhaps they wanted to remain Brooks, to maintain that connection to their birth parents. Sophie and Lily exchanged one of their silent twin communications, a look that seemed to contain an entire conversation. We want to be Sullivans, Sophie announced firmly. But, Robert prompted gently, could we keep Brooks as our middle names so we don't forget Mom and Dad completely? Robert felt his throat tighten. Sophie Brooks Sullivan and Lily Brooks Sullivan. I think that sounds perfect. When people ask us our names, can we say it that way? The whole thing, Lily asked. You can say it however you want, honey. It's your name. That night, Robert added a line to the adoption paperwork, officially requesting the name change to include Brooks as their middle names. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt important, an acknowledgement that the girls' history didn't begin with him, that their first family would always be part of who they were. October brought crisp air, falling leaves, and the twins' first day at their new school. They'd been homeschooled through the spring and summer, while Robert dealt with the trial and ongoing legal proceedings, but now it was time for normal routines, for making friends their own age, for experiencing childhood as it should be. Robert watched them walk into the elementary school building, matching backpacks, bouncing slightly with each step, Jake walking protectively between them. His heart swelled with a complex mixture of pride, hope, and anxiety. Would they fit in? Would other children be kind? Would teachers understand their special circumstances? He needn't have worried. The school had been fully briefed on the twins' background and had assigned them to a teacher experienced in working with traumatized children. By pickup time, both girls were chattering excitedly about their day, about new friends made about art projects and math problems, and the class guinea pig named Peanut. Life began to find a new rhythm. Weekday mornings were a rush of breakfast, packed lunches, last-minute homework checks. Afternoons brought homework at the kitchen table, Jake helping his sisters navigate fourth-grade math with the authority of a seasoned fifth grader. Weekends were for projects, building birdhouses in Robert's workshop, planting fall flowers in the garden, visiting parks and museums. The nights remained the hardest. Despite their progress, both twins still experienced nightmares, still sometimes woke screaming Catherine's name. Robert developed a sixth sense for these episodes, often reaching their bedroom before the screams fully formed. He would sit on the edge of their beds, rubbing backs, murmuring reassurances, sometimes reading aloud until they drifted back to sleep. One such night in late October, Robert found Lily sobbing quietly, trying not to wake her sister. Bad dream, he whispered, sitting beside her. She nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hand. I was back in that closet. The dark one in the basement, and I couldn't breathe. Robert stroked her hair gently. You're not there anymore. You're home. You're safe. I know. Lily's voice was small in the darkness, but sometimes my brain forgets. That's normal, sweetheart. Dr. Winters says it takes time for our minds to catch up with what our hearts already know. Will the dreams ever stop? Robert wished he could promise they would, but he refused to lie to these children who had been lied to for so long. They'll get less frequent, less scary. You'll get better at recognizing them for what they are, just dreams, not reality. Lily was quiet for a moment. Dad, do you still have bad dreams about Mom Elizabeth? The question caught him off guard. The twins rarely asked about Elizabeth, perhaps sensing the pain the subject still caused. Sometimes, not as often as I used to. What do you do when you have them? Robert considered his answer carefully. I remind myself of the good things, of the love we shared, of the wonderful son we raised together. I remind myself that grief is just love with nowhere to go. Grief is love with nowhere to go. Lily repeated softly. I like that. A nurse told me that when Elizabeth was sick, it helped me understand why it hurts so much to lose someone you love. It's not just that they're gone, it's that all the love you feel for them is still there, but they're not there to receive it anymore. Like with our first mom and dad. Lily's insight was startling. We don't really remember them, but we still love them, and that love doesn't have anywhere to go. Exactly. Robert felt a swell of admiration for this child's emotional intelligence. Except now, you have somewhere to put some of that love. With me and Jake, just like I had somewhere to put some of my love for Elizabeth when you and Sophie came into our lives. Lily reached for his hand in the darkness, so we helped each other. We absolutely did. November brought the final adoption hearing. After 10 months of paperwork, interviews, court appearances, and legal wrangling, the day had finally arrived. Robert dressed the children in their best clothes, his hands slightly unsteady as he helped Lily with the buttons on her cardigan. Are you nervous? She asked, watching his fingers fumble. A little, he admitted. This is a big day for our family. But nothing's really changing, Sophie pointed out practically. We're already a family. This is just making it official. True, but official matters too. The courtroom was different this time, smaller, warmer somehow. Instead of Catherine and her attorney, the room contained only people who wanted the best for the twins. Linda Reynolds sat in the front row beaming proudly. James Wilson was there, along with Detective Garcia and even Ashley Wright, who had taken a personal interest in the case. The judge, a grandfatherly man with wire-rimmed glasses, reviewed the final paperwork, asked a few routine questions, then addressed the twins directly. Sophie and Lily, I understand you've chosen to become Sullivans. Is that correct? Sophie Brooks Sullivan, Sophie corrected politely, and she's Lily Brooks Sullivan. The judge smiled. I stand corrected. Sophie Brooks Sullivan and Lily Brooks Sullivan. And this is what you want to have Mr. Sullivan as your legal father. He already is our dad, Lily said simply. This just makes it so everyone else knows too. Well put, the judge turned to Robert. And you, Mr. Sullivan. You understand that this adoption is permanent and irrevocable, that these children will be legally yours in every sense with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. I do, Robert answered, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. I've known they were mine since the moment I found them in the snow. The judge nodded, satisfied. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Minnesota, I hereby grant this adoption. Sophie Brooks Sullivan and Lily Brooks Sullivan are now legally and irrevocably your daughters. Congratulations, family. He banged his gavel, once the sound echoing with finality. The twins launched themselves at Robert, nearly knocking him off his chair. Jake joined the huddle, all four of them clinging to each other as cameras flashed and onlookers applauded. There were tears from Robert, from Linda, from James Wilson, who had searched so long for these girls, even from tough Detective Garcia, who pretended he had something in his eye. Outside the courthouse, snow had begun to fall, light, delicate flakes that melted on contact with the ground. Almost a year had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve, a year of challenges and battles and gradual healing. It's snowing, Lily whispered. Her face turned upward to catch flakes on her cheeks. Just like when you found us. But we're not cold this time, Sophie added. We're warm. And we'll always be warm from now on. Robert promised, gathering his three children close. Always. The first December snowfall dusted the Minneapolis neighborhood like powdered sugar, transforming Robert Sullivan's modest house into a scene from a Christmas card. Inside, warmth radiated from more than just the crackling fireplace. The twins had been officially Sullivans for nearly a month now, and with each passing day, the family bond strengthened, weaving four separate lives into one unified tapestry. Robert stood at the kitchen window, watching Jake teach the girls how to make proper snowballs in the backyard. Their laughter floated through the glass, a sound he once feared he might never hear again after Elizabeth died. Now it filled his home daily, sometimes accompanied by tears or arguments, or slammed doors and all the normal chaos of family life that he'd come to treasure. The monthly disbursement from the Brooks Trust Fund had arrived that morning. Robert still felt a strange mixture of gratitude and discomfort each time he received the funds. The money had saved them, had secured their future, had made it possible for him to launch his own small custom furniture business from the garage. Yet he could never shake the feeling that he was accepting payment for something he would have done anyway for children he would have loved regardless of their financial situation. James Wilson had assured him repeatedly that using the trust as Thomas and Sarah intended was not just appropriate, but necessary. They wanted their daughters taken care of, Robert. They would be grateful to you for giving Sophie and Lily a home, a family. Let the money do what it was meant to do. Intellectually, Robert understood this. Emotionally, he still struggled. It didn't help that the few times the twins' biological grandparents on their father's side had visited from Arizona, they'd made subtle comments about the trust, asking pointed questions about how the funds were being allocated. Their stiff formality with the girls and barely concealed judgment of Robert's modest lifestyle made these visits awkward affairs that everyone endured rather than enjoyed. The back door burst open, bringing in three snow-covered children and a blast of frigid air. Dad, can we make a snowman? A really big one." Sophie's cheeks were flushed red from the cold, her eyes bright with excitement. "The biggest snowman in Minnesota," Jake added, already pulling off his soaked mittens. After lunch, Robert smiled at their enthusiasm. "And only if you three get out of those wet clothes before you flood my kitchen floor." The children raced upstairs, leaving puddles and discarded boots in their wake. Robert began preparing grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, comfort food for a cold day. As he worked, he mentally reviewed his growing to-do list for the upcoming holidays. This would be their first Christmas as an official family, and Robert was determined to make it special. Last year's hastily assembled celebration had been magical in its way, but born of desperation and limited resources. This year, with financial stability and the legal battles behind them, he wanted to create lasting traditions that honored both the Brooks and Sullivan family histories. The upcoming weekend trip to the Christmas tree farm, decorating the house with both Sullivan ornaments that had been in Robert's family for generations and new ones that Sophie and Lily had selected, the special stockings from Elizabeth that the twins now used, Jake's insistence on making cookies from his mother's recipe book. It would be a blend of past and present, honoring what came before while celebrating what they had become. As the children thundered back downstairs in dry clothes, Robert's phone rang. Dr. Winters, the twins' therapist, rarely called between sessions unless something was important. "Dr. Winters, is everything okay?" The therapist's calm voice held a note of concern. "Everything's fine, Robert, but I wanted to discuss something with you. In our last session, both girls mentioned they'd like to visit Catherine in prison." Robert's stomach dropped. Visit Catherine? Why would they want to see her after everything she did? It's actually not uncommon for abuse survivors to seek some form of closure with their abusers, especially children. They have questions only Catherine can answer. In a controlled, supervised environment, such a meeting could potentially be healing. Robert watched the children, setting the table, their movements synchronized after months of sharing the chore. The thought of them in the same room as Catherine, even with guards and glass barriers, made him physically ill. "I don't think that's a good idea. The trial was traumatic enough." "I understand your concerns." Dr. Winter's voice remained steady, "but I'd like you to consider it. The girls need to reclaim their narrative to face Catherine from a position of safety and strength. It would be on their terms this time, not hers." "Can I think about it?" "Of course, we can discuss it more at their next session. In the meantime, perhaps just listen if they bring it up. Try to understand what they're seeking from such a visit without immediately dismissing the idea. After hanging up, Robert joined the children at the table, his mind still processing the conversation. He watched Sophie and Lily carefully looking for signs that they were still haunted by their past. But they seemed engaged in a typical sibling debate with Jake about which Christmas movie they should watch that evening. Had he missed something? Were they still struggling more than they showed? Or was this a sign of their healing that they felt secure enough now to face the source of their trauma? Robert kept his concerns to himself, determined not to dampen the children's cheerful mood. That evening, as they hung lights around the living room windows, he found himself watching the twins more intently than usual, cataloging each laugh, each frown, each casual touch, or slight withdrawal. "Dad, you're staring," Sophie finally commented, hands on hips in an unconscious mimicry of Elizabeth's favorite stance when she caught Robert lost in thought. The resemblance struck him so forcefully he almost gasped. "Sorry, sweetheart, just thinking about how much has changed since last Christmas." "Good changes," Lily added quietly, stringing lights with careful precision. "The best changes." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Robert pulled out the sealed envelope that James Wilson had given him months ago, Sarah Brooks' letters to her daughters. He'd been saving them, waiting for the right moment, unsure if the girls were emotionally ready to receive such powerful connections to their past. Perhaps this Christmas would be that moment, a gift more precious than anything he could buy. He ran his fingers over Sarah's handwriting on the envelope. "To my daughters when they're old enough to understand." Would reading their mother's last words help the twins make sense of their journey? Would it satisfy whatever need was driving them to consider visiting Catherine? Or would it reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal? The following week brought the annual holiday concert at the children's school. Robert sat in the auditorium's uncomfortable plastic chair, video camera ready, heart swelling with pride as Jake's fifth-grade class performed Winter Wonderland, with enthusiastic, if not always accurate, hand motions. When the fourth-grade classes took the stage, his eyes locked immediately on Sophie and Lily. For months, they'd practiced their song in secret, refusing to let him hear it before the performance. Now they stood side by side in matching green dresses, hair neatly braided, looking so grown up his chest ached. The music started, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," and Robert watched in amazement as Lily stepped forward for a solo, her clear voice carrying through the auditorium without a hint of the shyness that usually characterized her. Sophie joined for the second verse, their voices blending in perfect harmony as only twins can. By the final chorus, Robert was wiping away tears, not bothering to hide them from the knowing smiles of parents around him. After the performance, he gathered the children in a group hug, pride rendering him momentarily speechless. "Did you like it, Dad?" Lily's eyes searched his face anxiously. "I was really scared, but Sophie said I could do it." "Like it? I loved it. You were both incredible. And Jake, those hand motions were perfect." "Mom would have loved it too," Jake said quietly. "Both moms." The simple statement hung in the air, acknowledging the complex layers of their family story without awkwardness or pain. It was the first time Jake had so directly included Sarah Brooks in their family narrative. That weekend they drove to a Christmas tree farm, an hour outside the city, the car filled with holiday music and excited chatter. The tradition of cutting their own tree was one Robert had started with Elizabeth and Jake, continuing it even in the difficult years after her death. Now it felt like the perfect way to merge past and present to create continuity while embracing change. The tree farm was crowded with families engaged in the same quest. Children darted between rows of pines and firs, parents called out warnings and suggestions, farm employees circulated with hot chocolate and candy canes. The festive atmosphere was infectious even to Robert, who normally found crowds draining. "Remember, not too big," he cautioned as the children raced ahead. "It has to fit through our front door and under our ceiling." "We know, Dad," they called back in unison, already disappearing among the trees. Robert followed more slowly, savoring the crisp air and the scent of pine. Last year at this time, he'd been too overwhelmed by grief and financial stress to even consider getting a tree. Jake had eventually convinced him to pull the artificial one from the attic, more to maintain some sense of normalcy than from any real Christmas spirit. Then two small freezing figures had appeared in his headlights, changing everything. He found the children standing before an enormous blue spruce, at least 9 feet tall. This one, Sophie declared, arms spread wide as if to embrace the massive tree. It's perfect, Lily agreed. Jake looked at Robert apologetically. I told them it's too big, but they won't listen. Robert assessed the tree dubiously. It would barely fit in their living room, would probably scrape the ceiling, would drop needles everywhere, and would be a nightmare to decorate. Please, Dad. The twins' pleading faces crumbled his resistance instantly. We'll need to cut at least a foot off the bottom, he sighed, already reaching for the saw. The joy on their faces as they helped drag the tree back to the car, as they struggled to secure it to the roof, as they carefully maneuvered it into the house that was worth every inconvenience. The massive spruce dominated the living room, its top bent slightly against the ceiling, its breadth requiring the rearrangement of furniture. But when they finished decorating it that evening, lights twinkling among ornaments, new and old, Robert had to admit it was magnificent. Best tree ever, Jake proclaimed, flopping onto the couch to admire their work. Even better than the one from last year, Robert asked, remembering the small artificial tree they'd hastily decorated for the twins' first morning in their home. Jake considered this seriously. That one was special in a different way. It was the beginning of our family. Sophie and Lily curled up on either side of Jake, a position that had become their natural configuration over the months. This one is special because we picked it together, Sophie reasoned, as Sullivans. The twins' first mention of Catherine came later that week, and as Robert helped them address Christmas cards to their classmates. He'd been prepared since Dr. Winter's call had rehearsed potential responses in his mind, but the question still caught him off guard. Dad, can we send a Christmas card to Aunt Catherine? Lily's voice was casual, as if asking about sending a card to a favorite teacher. Robert set down the pen he'd been using. Why would you want to do that? Sophie answered matter-of-factly. Because even though she was mean to us, she's still alone in prison at Christmas. That seems sad. The compassion in their voices, these children who had suffered so terribly at Catherine's hands, left Robert momentarily speechless. Dr. Winters had warned him not to dismiss their feelings, but he struggled to understand this apparent forgiveness. I don't think that's a good idea right now, he finally managed. But I'd like to understand why you're thinking about her. The twins exchanged their familiar, silent communication. Dr. Winters says it's okay to have complicated feelings about people who hurt you, Sophie explained, that you can be angry and even miss them sometimes. Do you miss her? Robert had asked gently. Not really her, Lily clarified, but sometimes we miss our cousin Noah, and we wonder if Aunt Catherine is sorry for what she did. I think Robert chose his words carefully, that Catherine is a very troubled person who let jealousy poison her heart. I don't know if she's capable of true remorse. Dr. Winters said we could write her a letter if we wanted, Sophie persisted. Not to be friends again, but to tell her how we feel now, that we're happy and safe and that she can't hurt us anymore. Would that help you? Robert searched their faces for signs of distress, but found only thoughtful consideration. Maybe, Lily shrugged. Dr. Winters says sometimes saying things out loud makes them more real. Like how when I say I'm a Sullivan now, it makes it feel more true. Robert nodded slowly. Let's talk more with Dr. Winters about this at your next session. If writing letters would help you process your feelings, we can consider that step first before anything else. The twins seemed satisfied with this compromise, returning to their Christmas cards without further discussion. But Robert's mind continued to race. Were they ready for any contact with Catherine? Would it help their healing or set them back? He trusted Dr. Winter's professional judgment, but his paternal instinct screamed to protect them from any further harm. That night, after checking on the sleeping children, Robert found himself drawn to the photo album Andrew had given the twins, the one containing pictures of Thomas and Sarah Brooks. He rarely looked at it, feeling somehow that it belonged exclusively to the girls, a private connection to their first parents. But tonight he carefully turned the pages, studying the faces of the people who had created Sophie and Lily. Thomas Brooks had been whole and lean, with the same heart-shaped face the twins had inherited. In most photos, his expression was thoughtful, slightly reserved, but his eyes crinkled at the corners in a way that suggested frequent laughter. Sarah was smaller, vibrant, her blonde hair and bright smile immediately recognizable in her daughters. They looked happy together, comfortable, their body language revealing the easy intimacy of a solid partnership. What would they think of him, this stranger who had assumed a responsibility for their precious daughters? Would they approve of his parenting decisions? Would they understand his reluctance to allow any contact with Catherine? Would they agree with Dr. Winters that confronting their abuser might be therapeutic? "I'm doing my best," he whispered to their smiling images. "I promise I'll always put them first." The next therapy session arrived with Robert attending the last 15 minutes as usual. Dr. Winters greeted him warmly, the twins already settled comfortably in the colorful office filled with art supplies, puppets, and fidget toys. "We've been discussing the possibility of contact with Catherine," Dr. Winters began. "The girls have thought carefully about what they might want to say to her." "We decided we want to write letters first," Sophie announced, "not Christmas cards. And we don't need to visit her right now," Lily added. "Maybe not ever." Relief washed over Robert. "That sounds like a thoughtful decision." Dr. Winters nodded approvingly. "We talked about how writing letters would give them control over their words, time to think about exactly what they want to say. They understand Catherine might not respond or might respond in ways that aren't helpful. And we don't have to mail them if we don't want to," Sophie interjected. "We can just write them for ourselves." "Exactly." Dr. Winters smiled. "Writing can be therapeutic even if no one else ever reads the words." "So what happens now?" Robert asked. "The girls will work on their letters during our sessions, where I can provide support if difficult emotions arise. Then we'll decide together whether sending them is appropriate." It was a reasonable plan, one that gave the twins agency while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Robert found himself once again grateful for Dr. Winter's balanced approach. As they left the office, Lily slipped her hand into Robert's. "Are you mad that we want to write to her?" "Not at all." Robert squeezed her small hand reassuringly. "I'm proud of you both for finding healthy ways to process what happened. I just want to make sure you're protected in the process." "That's what dads do," Sophie stated with absolute confidence. "Protect their kids." The simple faith in her words hit Robert like a physical force. After everything these children had endured, they still believed in the fundamental goodness of family, still trusted that parents should and would keep them safe. Their resilience continued to astound him. The weekend before Christmas, they visited Thomas and Sarah's graves. Robert had suggested waiting until spring when the cemetery would be less bleak, but the twins had insisted. "We want to tell them about becoming Sullivans," Sophie had explained, "and about our big Christmas tree." The cemetery was peaceful under its blanket of snow, the silence broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the crunch of their boots on the path. Jake had come along too, carrying a wreath he had helped the twins make, decorated with pine cones and red berries. The headstone was simple but elegant, Thomas and Sarah Brooks, beloved parents gone too soon. Robert hung back slightly as the three children approached, giving them space for this intimate moment. "Hi, Mom and Dad," Sophie began, her breath visible in the cold air. "We wanted to tell you we have a new last name now. We're Sophie and Lily Brooks Sullivan. We kept Brooks in the middle," Lily continued, "so we'd always have a piece of you with us. And we have a new dead-in brother," Sophie gestured toward Robert and Jake. "They found us last Christmas when we were really cold and scared. They took us home and made us feel safe. Our new dad makes furniture," Lily added proudly. "Really beautiful tables and chairs and things. And Jake teaches us about space and dinosaurs and how to play baseball." Jake stepped forward, carefully placing the wreath against the headstone. "I'll take good care of your daughters," he promised solemnly. "They're my sisters now." Robert's throat tightened at his son's words, at the gravity with which the 10-year-old assumed his role as protective older brother. These quiet moments of maturity still caught him by surprise. The twins continued their one-sided conversation, telling their parents about school friends, their Christmas tree, the gifts they'd made for Robert and Jake. There was no sadness in their voices, only the innocent eagerness of children sharing important news with loved ones. Finally, they beckoned Robert forward. "Dad, tell them about the bunk beds you're making us for Christmas." Robert froze, shooting Jake a startled look. The bunk beds were supposed to be a surprise, a secret project he'd been working on in a friend's workshop during the hours the children were at school. Jake's eyes widened guiltily. "I didn't tell. I promise," Sophie giggled. "No one told us. We found the drawings in your workshop when we were looking for wrapping paper." "And we pretended not to see them," Lily added earnestly. "We'll still be surprised on Christmas morning." Robert couldn't help laughing. So much for secrets in this family. He moved closer to the headstone, feeling strangely self-conscious, addressing people he had never met. Yes, I'm building them bunk beds. Sophie claims the top bunk, Lily wants the bottom. They've outgrown the twin beds they're using now. He paused, then continued more softly. They're amazing girls, smart kind, resilient. You'd be so proud of them. I wish you could see who they're becoming. The simple truth of those words lingered in the air. For all the joy the twins had brought to his life, there remained the immutable tragedy that their first parents had been robbed of watching their daughters grow up. We should head back, Robert finally said, noting the children's reddened cheeks and noses. It's getting colder. As they walked back to the car, Lily took his hand again. Dad, if our first parents had lived, we wouldn't be Sullivans now. Is it wrong that I'm glad we found you even though it means they had to die? The question struck at the heart of the complex emotions surrounding their blended family history. No, honey, it's not wrong. Life isn't simple. We can be cheated about losing people we love and still be grateful for the good things that came after. Both feelings can be true at the same time. Like how I miss Mom Elizabeth, but I'm glad Sophie and Lily came to live with us, Jake contributed thoughtfully. If Mom hadn't died, Dad might not have been driving around looking at Christmas lights that night, and we might never have found them. Exactly, Robert nodded once again, struck by his son's emotional intelligence. Life is full of connections, like that, sad things and happy things, all tangled together. Dr. Winters calls it both and thinking, Sophie piped up. Not either or. You can feel two different things at once. Back home, the warmth of the house embraced them immediately. The children shed their winter gear and gravitated to the kitchen, where hot chocolate had become the standard post-outing ritual. As Robert prepared the drinks, he reflected on Lily's profound question. Their family had indeed been forged through multiple tragedies: Elizabeth's death, Thomas and Sarah's accident, the twins' abuse at Catherine's hands. Yet from those broken pieces, something beautiful had emerged. The week before Christmas brought a flurry of activity: last-minute shopping, cookie baking present, wrapping, and school holiday parties. Robert worked late into the night in his friend's workshop, putting the finishing touches on the bunk beds that were no longer a surprise but would still be the twins' main gift. 3 days before Christmas, a letter arrived addressed to Sophie and Lily in unfamiliar handwriting. The return address made Robert's heart skip a beat: Noah Morris, with Andrew's new address in Iowa. He debated whether to give it to them immediately or wait until after the holidays, concerned about the emotions it might stir up. In the end, he decided honesty was the best approach. That evening after dinner, he handed the envelope to the twins. This came today. It's from your cousin Noah. The girls' eyes widened. They opened the letter together, heads bent close, reading silently. Robert and Jake waited, trying not to hover, but unable to hide their curiosity. After several minutes, Sophie looked up. Noah says they moved to Iowa to be closer to his grandparents. He's in a new school and has made some friends. His dad got a job at a bank. He sent us a picture, Lily added, holding up a school photo of Noah. The boy looked happier. Then Robert remembered his smile more natural, his eyes clearer. He wants to know if we can be pen pals, Sophie continued. He says he misses us sometimes and thinks about us a lot. How do you feel about that? Robert asked carefully. The twins considered the question with their usual thoughtfulness. I think it would be nice, Lily finally said. Noah was always kind to us when he could be. And he helped at the trial, Sophie added. He was brave to tell the truth about his mom. If you'd like to write back, that would be fine, Robert assured them. Noah isn't responsible for what Catherine did. We know, they answered together. Later, Robert called Andrew to ensure the contact was appropriate. The man sounded dramatically different from the fearful, hesitant person he'd been during the trial, his voice stronger, more confident. Noah's been asking about the girls for months, Andrew explained. His therapist thought writing to them might help him process his own guilt and grief, but only if Sophie and Lily are comfortable with it. They seemed positive about the idea, Robert assured him. They've always spoken kindly of Noah. That means a lot. He carries a heavy burden for a 12-year-old. Witnessing what his mother did, feeling helpless to stop it, then testifying against her, it's a lot to reconcile. How are you doing? Robert found himself genuinely curious about the man's new life. Better, much better. Iowa is a fresh start for us both. No one here knows our history. I'm not the man whose wife abused her nieces. I'm just Noah's dad. Andrew paused, then added quietly, thank you, by the way, for giving the girls a good home, for being the man I couldn't be. You did the right thing in the end, Robert reminded him. That matters. The conversation left Robert reflective. Everyone involved in this complex situation was finding their way forward, healing at their own pace. The twins with their remarkable resilience. Noah and Andrew building a new life far from Catherine's shadow. Even he and Jake had transformed their small family of two, expanding to embrace the twins in ways he could never have imagined. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh snowfall, transforming the neighborhood into a winter wonderland once again. The parallels to last year were impossible to ignore: the snow, the cold, the approaching holiday. But where last year had brought desperation and fear, this year brought only anticipation and joy. The children spent the afternoon making final preparations, setting out cookies for Santa, a tradition Jake had long outgrown, but enthusiastically revived for his sister's hanging stockings, arranging presents under the massive tree. Robert found himself taking photos, constantly determined to document every moment of their first official Christmas as a family. That evening, they drove through neighborhoods, looking at Christmas lights, the same tradition that had led Robert and Jake to discover the twins a year earlier. The children oohed and awed at elaborate displays, debating which houses had the best decorations, which ones had the most lights. Remember last year? Jake's voice was quiet from the back seat. We were driving on that empty road and we almost didn't see them. I remember. Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I still think about what might have happened if we hadn't driven down that particular street at that particular time. But you did, Sophie said simply. You found us. That's what matters. They returned home rosy-cheeked and sleepy. After changing into new Christmas pajamas, another Sullivan tradition revived. The children gathered in the living room where Robert had a special announcement. I have something important to give you girls tonight, he said, retrieving a carefully wrapped package from his desk. Something that's been waiting for the right moment. The twins accepted the package with curious expressions. Inside was the envelope James Wilson had given Robert months ago, still sealed with Sarah's handwriting, clearly visible on the front. These are letters your mother wrote to you before she died, Robert explained gently. She wanted you to have them when you were old enough to understand. Sophie and Lily stared at the envelope in stunned silence, their fingers touching the handwriting reverently. Can we read them now? Lily finally whispered. Of course. Would you like some privacy? Or would you like me and Jake to stay? The twins exchanged their silent communication. Stay, Sophie decided. You're our family too. With trembling fingers, they carefully opened the envelope. Inside were two separate letters, each addressed to one twin, and a third envelope marked for both my girls. They opened the shared letter first, Sophie reading aloud in a wavering voice. My dearest Sophie and Lily, if you're reading this, it means that something has happened to your father and me. I pray that this letter never reaches you, that we'll be there to see you grow up, to help you become the amazing women I know you will be. But life is uncertain, and your father and I want to make sure you hear these words from us even if we can't say them in person. First, know that you were wanted and loved from the moment we knew you existed. When we learned we were having twins, your father and I cried with joy. Two beautiful daughters to cherish, to raise, to love. You were born healthy and perfect, with 10 tiny fingers and 10 tiny toes each, and the most gorgeous blue eyes that would later change to match your father's. Sophie, you came first, announcing your arrival with a strong cry that made the nurses laugh. You were always watching, taking everything in, curious about the world from your first breath. Lily, you followed 4 minutes later, quieter, but just as determined, your little hand immediately reaching for your sister's, as if to say, I'm here now, let's face this world together. As I write this, you are 3 years old, full of energy and questions and imagination. Sophie, you love stories about brave knights and dragons. Lily, you collect pretty rocks and hide them in your pockets. You both love to dance in the kitchen, while I cook dinner, to help your father water the garden, to sing songs at the top of your lungs in the car. You are joy embodied, and our love for you is beyond measure. If we're gone, I hope you've been raised with love and kindness. I hope you've been allowed to become yourselves, to follow your passions, to make mistakes and learn from them. I hope you've had people in your life who have cherished you as we would have. Remember that you carry us with you always, not just in your DNA, but in the values we hope to instill: compassion, curiosity, courage, integrity. You are our greatest achievements. our most precious legacy. And remember always that you have each other. The bond between twins is special, sacred. Take care of each other, love each other, be each other's strength when the world feels overwhelming. We love you beyond words, beyond time, beyond the boundaries of life and death. You are and always will be the best parts of us. With eternal love, Mom and Dad, who is reading over my shoulder and crying though he'll deny it later. The twins finished reading in tears, clutching each other's hands tightly. Jake wiped his eyes with his pajama sleeve, trying to be discreet. Robert made no attempt to hide his emotion, letting the tears fall freely. She loved us. Lily's voice was wonder-filled. She really, really loved us. Of course she did, Robert said softly. How could she not? We don't really remember them, Sophie admitted. Just feelings sometimes, like the smell of cookies baking or someone singing. Those are precious memories, Robert had assured her. And now you have this letter too, her words, her love preserved on paper. The twins carefully returned the letter to its envelope, deciding to save the individual letters for Christmas morning. They each hugged Robert fiercely, then Jake, a family circle of shared emotion. Thank you for finding us, Dad, Lily whispered against his chest. Thank you for making us Sullivans. Thank you for letting me, Robert answered simply. Later, after the children were asleep, Robert sat alone beside the Christmas tree, watching the play of lights across the darkened room. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of settling timbers and the soft hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, the loss of Elizabeth, the financial struggles, the chance encounter on a snowy road, the battle for custody, the adoption, the healing. So many moments where things could have gone differently, where paths could have diverged, where connections could have been missed. What were the odds that he would be driving down that particular street at that exact moment? What were the odds that two freezing children would survive 8 hours in a Minnesota winter? What were the odds that a grieving widower with mounting debts would take in two traumatized girls without hesitation? Some would call it coincidence, others divine intervention. Robert preferred to think of it as the complex interweaving of human lives, the invisible threads that connect strangers and transform them into family. His phone buzzed with a text message. Linda Reynolds checking in as she often did during significant milestones. Thinking of you all on this special anniversary, how are the girls doing? They're amazing, he typed back. We all are. Merry Christmas, Linda. Thank you for everything. He set the phone down and returned to his contemplation. Tomorrow morning would bring excited children, torn wrapping paper exclamations over gifts, the traditional Sullivan Christmas breakfast of cinnamon rolls and hot chocolate. Then the assembling of the bunk beds, setting up the twins' room with their new furniture, perhaps a walk in the snow, or sledding at the nearby park. Normal family moments, precious in their ordinariness. Robert finally stood turning off the Christmas tree lights and checking the locks one last time. As he passed the twins' room, he paused, listening to their soft breathing. Safe, loved, home. Christmas morning dawned bright in clear sunlight, reflecting off fresh snow with diamond-like brilliance. Robert awoke to the sound of whispered conversations and stifled giggles outside his bedroom door. Checking his watch, 6:15 a.m., he smiled, remembering the Sullivan family rule that no one could wake Dad before 6:30 on Christmas morning. The children were trying to be patient, trying to follow the rules, but their excitement was palpable, even through the closed door. Robert decided to show mercy, calling out loudly enough for them to hear, I wonder if Santa came last night. Someone should probably go check. The door burst open immediately, 3 pajama-clad children piling onto his bed with shouts of Merry Christmas, Dad. And he came, we peeked. There are so many presents. Merry Christmas. Robert laughed, accepting hugs from all sides. Give me 1 minute to brush my teeth, and I'll meet you downstairs. The living room had been transformed overnight. Presents spilled from under the tree stockings bulged with small gifts, and the plate of cookies left for Santa contained nothing but crumbs. Robert had stayed up until nearly 2 a.m. arranging everything, but the children's excitement made every moment of lost sleep worthwhile. Can we open them now? Jake asked, bouncing slightly on his toes despite his efforts to seem mature. Stockings first, then breakfast, then presents. Robert recited the familiar order. Sullivan family tradition. The next hour passed in a blur of tissue paper exclamations, thank yous, and hugs. The twins had made Robert a hand-painted wooden picture frame containing a photo of all four of them, the Sullivan family, burned into the bottom in Jake's careful wood burning. Jake had received the telescope he'd been hinting about for months. Every gift was met with genuine gratitude, every moment captured in Robert's memory and occasionally on his camera. Finally, only one large package remained propped against the wall and addressed to both Sophie and Lily. Robert's craftsmanship revealed itself as they tore away the paper. Two beautifully made wooden bed frames designed to stack as bunk beds with the girls' names carved into the headboards and small shelves built into the sides for books and treasures. "It's even better than the drawings," Sophie exclaimed, running her fingers over the smooth wood and intricate carvings. "You made this yourself?" Lily asked, eyes wide with admiration. "I did," Robert confirmed, pride evident in his voice. "Custom designed for two very special girls. Can we set it up now?" Jake was already examining the connectors, figuring out how the pieces fit together. "After breakfast," Robert promised, "and after you two read your special letters." The twins retrieved the individual letters they'd saved from the night before. Each retreated to a quiet corner to read her mother's private words, the room falling silent, except for occasional sniffles and the rustling of paper. When they finished, they traded letters, then carefully folded them and returned them to their envelopes. Whatever Sarah had written to each girl individually would remain private, a sacred communication between mother and daughter that even Robert wouldn't ask about unless they chose to share. "I think," Sophie said quietly, "that our first mom would be happy about our new family." "I think so too," Lily agreed. "She said in my letter that she wanted us to be raised with love, and we are." "You absolutely are," Robert assured them, gathering all three children into a group hug. "And you always will be." Later, as they worked together to assemble the bunk beds, Robert marveled at how seamlessly they functioned as a family unit. Jake held pieces steady while Robert connected them. The twins organized screws and brackets, fetched tools when needed, tested the sturdiness of each joint as it was completed. By afternoon, the new beds were assembled in the twins' room, complete with new matching comforters and the special pillows Jake had selected as his gift to his sisters. Sophie immediately climbed to the top bunk, declaring she could see the whole neighborhood from her window now. Lily arranged her stuffed animals on the bottom bunk, creating a cozy nest. "What do you think, Dad?" Jake asked proudly, surveying their handiwork. "I think," Robert answered, his voice thick with emotion, "that we've built something pretty amazing here. And I'm not just talking about the beds." He looked around at the three expectant faces turned toward him. Jake, his firstborn, growing more thoughtful and compassionate with each passing day. Sophie, fierce and protective, her determination tempered by newfound security. Lily, gentle but resilient, blossoming in the warmth of unconditional love. "A year ago today, we were strangers," he continued. "Now we're family. Not because of blood or legal documents, but because we chose each other. Because we built this family together, piece by piece, day by day." "Like the bunk beds," Lily suggested with a smile. "Exactly like the bunk beds, with care and patience and love. The family Sullivan forged in adversity, strengthened by choice, bound by love that transcended biology and circumstance. Complete."